I don't care about your feelings. And I tell this to my students in pretty much every training session. Here's how it goes down. Anytime that I'm teaching a student a new technique or a new skill in archery, they will often say to me, they'll say, "Coach, that doesn't feel normal," or "that feels a bit weird," right? It feels weird. So this is what I mean when I say I don't care about your feelings, okay? And in this video, I'm going to break down 6 reasons why it is dangerous to learn a new skill or a new technique based on the feeling of it. And this is a trap that a lot of archers and coaches fall into as well. But I'm not going to leave you hanging there. I'm also going to break down what you should be focusing on instead in order to accelerate and optimize skill acquisition for new techniques. Let's get started. Reason number 1 why your feelings don't matter. If what feels normal isn't right, then what is right will not feel normal. Everything feels weird the first time. Do you know what it feels like in order to put ice skates on for the first time? Not only have you got these awkward heavy things bolted onto your feet, but they've got no resistance forward or backwards, and side to side they're very sensitive to balance. If you want to move forward, you can't just take a step, right? You're going to fall on your ass. You actually need to kind of propel yourself off and glide with one foot. The mechanics of something like ice skating is completely counterintuitive. And it's exactly the same whether you're learning how to ice skate, learning how to swim butterfly, learning how to use chopsticks, whatever it is, the first time you learn something is going to feel weird, right? And it's the same with shooting a bow. You're going to get more uncomfortable before you get comfortable. So, if what feels normal isn't right, then what is right will not feel normal. Now, the second reason why your feelings don't matter when learning a new skill is that feelings change over time, don't they? Just ask my ex-girlfriend. You see, in a sport like archery, your result, your score depends pretty much on your ability to do the exact same technique and replicate the shot process every single time. So you have to exert the same force on the bow, you have to be in the same position at full draw, you have to have the consistent reaction on release, good timing. And so all of these things need to be precise in order to get a high score in a sport like archery. Now keep that in mind because I've got a couple of examples for you. Now, example number 1. Imagine, if you forget about archery, imagine that you're learning how to do the splits, okay? And what's going to happen is, as you go into the splits, you'll feel a stretch in your hamstrings, won't you? Now, as you become more flexible and you train that position, what's going to happen? Well, you'll be able to go deeper into that stretch before you feel the same sensation of a stretch, right? So you can see that for the same feeling, the position can change over time. Now, a common scenario in archery is that I'll be teaching an archer to maybe set the front shoulder and achieve shoulder alignment in the pre-draw position. But if an archer learns that feeling, it's quite normal to have a little stretch and a little bit of muscle tightness when you're first learning that position. Often archers will go away and they'll try and replicate that feeling. And what they'll end up doing is they will end up, as they get fitter, stronger, and more flexible, they end up contorting themselves and reinforcing these weird positions, these weird bad habits, because they're exaggerating the technique to replicate the feeling, okay? So that's very important. You don't want to chase the feeling or chase the position. We'll touch more on that later. Second example I want to run through here is that imagine I say, do 100 push-ups. Now, push-ups are a pretty simple action. One push-up should pretty much look like every other push-up. But how's your first push-up going to feel against your 10th or your 20th or your 50th or 100th push-up, okay? To do the same action, the more you get fatigued, the perceived effort, the perceived force that you have to put into that push-up is going to be different to create the same action, right? Now think about your 72-arrow scoring round, okay? Your first shot, your last shot, and every shot in between has to be the same, but do you think they're going to feel all identical? No, okay? What if you find yourself shooting on a World Cup circuit? Maybe you're jet lagged one day, maybe you're a little bit dehydrated, maybe you slept on a crappy mattress in the hotel and it's cold one day and humid the next. Your shots aren't going to feel the same, but you need to make them the same. And so feelings change over time with development, as well as day to day or even within a day. So chasing shots based on a feeling will lead you to create variability to try and replicate a feeling. So the third reason why your feelings don't matter when learning a new skill is that skill mastery is subconscious. When you master a skill, it's not a mechanical thought process that you go through, is it? Okay, it's automatic. And that's the whole point of skill mastery, is to train and then reinforce those neural pathways so that under stress, under competition pressure, your subconscious nervous system knows what to do and can take over. So you can apply this to something simple like walking down the stairs. So if you try and walk down the stairs, which you probably do multiple times a day without even thinking about it, okay, if you try and walk down the stairs based on the feeling in your muscles of walking down the stairs, you'll get 2 steps in and then you'll fall over, because that's not, you're trying to take a subconscious process and then try and think through it mechanically. That's not what happens, and that's how you ruin your shot process. Now, whenever you're learning a new skill, it starts off as conscious, doesn't it? But then with training and with repetition, then eventually it becomes subconscious. But you don't get there by chasing a feeling. The next reason why it is dangerous to learn a skill based on feeling is based on the expert fallacy. Now, if you go up to a pro archer, if you go up to an expert and you ask them what their shot feels like, they'll be able to tell you with sometimes a lot of detail what a good shot feels like and what a bad shot feels like. And they'll often use a lot of creative visual metaphors in order to articulate those feelings. So I've heard some pro archers talk about their shot like an elastic band slowly building tension right until it's cut at the moment of release. Or that their shot is like snowflakes falling on a leaf, slowly building pressure until it gives way, and that's the moment of release. So these kind of visual metaphors are really, really great for experts who have a high degree of subconscious skill already trained in, okay? However, the expert fallacy is that experts often forget what it's like not to know the things that they know. And so sometimes experts will explain things in relatively simple terms, but there's such a difference in foundational knowledge sometimes between what they're saying and what your understanding is that it just doesn't translate. My mechanic makes this mistake with me all the time. Every time I take my car for a service, he's talking about the gasket and the bushes need replacing and I need a new Shawshank or whatever. But we're talking a different language. I don't understand the terminology because I'm not a mechanic. And be very, very careful. You should expose yourself to the perspectives and the opinions of a broad range of experts, but you've got to filter it through and apply it in the resolution of your skill. So please be careful. Don't try and copy what the pros do based on their feelings. Now, the 5th reason why you shouldn't learn a skill based on feeling is that feelings are mostly completely subjective. So what feels one way for me might feel different to someone else and different for you again. So coaches need to be very, very mindful of this in the way that they articulate things based on feeling and also the way that they understand what people say based on feeling. So an example is I recently had one of my students come up to me in training, a young girl, and she said to me that my shoulders hurt. So I take this pretty seriously because we don't want to injure her, right? And so I inquired and I asked her, okay, well, can you show me where the pain is? Can you point to yourself on where the pain is? And how bad is it on a scale of 1 to 10? Is it like a sharp stabbing kind of pain, or is it more of a dull ache? Do you feel it through a certain range of motion? Is it hurting right now, or does it only hurt through a certain part of your shot process? And after a bit of inquiry, we actually discovered that what she was describing was that her shoulders were tired. Okay, she didn't understand that the difference between the impingement of a bicep tendon or delayed onset muscle soreness or a strained supraspinatus. She couldn't articulate that with any nuance. So she just said to her shoulders hurt. And she hadn't felt that little bit of strain before, which is quite normal. Now, if one of my advanced archers came to me and said, my shoulder hurts, that could mean something completely different. So remember this, coaches, people are generally very bad at articulating and understanding feelings. So you got to be very, very careful, either the way you articulate things and also the way you understand communication around feelings. It is completely subjective. Now, the 6th and the final reason why you shouldn't learn a skill based on feeling is that you're not sensitive enough. Now, I'm not saying you're not sensitive enough like you didn't cry during Titanic, you're not sensitive enough. What I mean is that, no, most archers I know, they can't walk and chew gum at the same time, let alone have the advanced level of proprioception required in order to make those fine adjustments in muscular contraction required in order to change and improve technique. Archery is a complex sport made up of many different coordinated and complex motor patterns. So to give an example of this, this is the reason why most people absolutely suck at back tension. It's because how are they taught? Focus on the feeling of your back muscles squeezing together. Focus on the feeling of your back muscles. This doesn't work, guys. And I'll tell you why. If you do an example with me here, we'll do a little demonstration. If you take your arm and you contract your bicep like this through the range of motion, do you feel much in your bicep? Well, there's no resistance, so you shouldn't really, right? When the level of resistance is low, you will have a very low perception of exertion of force. But if you take your bicep and you squeeze your arm like this and continue to squeeze it, you can feel your bicep contracting, can't you? It's at the end of the range of motion, and so you can squeeze it and you can feel it. So what happens when you go through your shot process and you try and create the same thing? Well, first of all, I'll tell you something now. The feeling of a good shot should not be muscular strain. The feeling of a good shot should almost be effortless. And if you're an experienced archer, you'll know this feeling. So you shouldn't have your bow so heavy that as you're expanding, you're feeling a muscular strain in your back muscles. So what do people end up doing? They end up exaggerating their technique and over retracting their drawing side scapula to the point where there's nowhere left to go, there's no expansion left to happen, and then they're just squeezing the muscle. Just like your bicep here, you're squeezing, 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 and there's nothing happening, there's no movement happening. So you lose all the power even though you're exerting yourself very strongly and perceiving a high amount of force, and you're feeling your back muscles, but it's not working, is it? So this is something you need to be very, very careful of, and it's a perfect example of why you shouldn't learn technique based on feelings. All right, you get the message. You shouldn't learn a skill based on feeling. But what the hell should you focus on? Well, I'm glad you asked, because I want to outline the mastery focus framework. And this is what you should be focusing on for skill acquisition and mastery. There are 3 elements, relatively simple: position, transition, repetition. Okay? So let's go through this. The first thing you need to focus on when you're learning a new skill are the key positions of that skill. Now, I've done an entire video here on YouTube about the 4 key positions you need to train to master your shot process. I'll link that up here and down below. Once you have mastered the key positions, it's about transition. That means between those positions, you need to learn the motion and the transition between those positions with fluidity and efficiency. Once you have the position, once you have the transition, it's about repetition and drilling it in through many repetitions. Not until you can get it right, but until you can't get it wrong. And that's reinforcing those subconscious neural pathways we talked about in this video in terms of translating it from a mechanical conscious skill into subconscious skill, which is where skill mastery lays, okay? So the next question you're gonna ask is, Jarryd, is there any place in training or in coaching for feelings? And there is, actually, but be very cautious. What we need to do is, instead of teaching a skill based on feeling, we need to use drills to teach the feeling of the skill. So this is where we use kinesthetic drills which replicate and teach the feeling rather than teaching feelings in order to achieve the skill. So if you're interested in that, that's what we cover in the Rogue Archery Masterclass. We have all the drills, all the guided training sessions, all the training programs over there. If you're looking at taking your archery to the next level, guys, go check that out. I'll link that one down below as well. But tell me what you think. Out of those 6 key reasons why you shouldn't learn skill based on feelings, were there any that stood out to you? Did you actually learn back tension based on feeling, and how's it working out for you? I'm curious to hear if it's going all right. But yeah, guys, hope you enjoyed this video. And as always, love from the Rogue Archery community, and I look forward to seeing you guys in the next one. Cheers.